This is better for the voice. And the voice. This is better. Rabbi Alexander. Okay, I'm going to get one for myself. Would you like one?
Yes, please. Hello, everybody. We'll be getting started in just a minute. Do you go by Kita Zion or 7th grade? Or what do you do? I'd like to welcome everybody. We're going to get started in just a moment. Oh, shoot. Ken, go fix that. We had of course we had the technology person here today who said that the pictures wouldn't go off, but you know, best laid plans. I'll get that back up on the wall. It was Ira, the Kita Zion teacher, who I got an opportunity to talk with a number of months ago. And he is teaching Holocaust to Kita Zion, teaching about the Holocaust to Kita Zion. And together we decided that we would commemorate Kristallnacht tonight, talk about it some, include people from Kita Zion, which we're very happy to do, and we're glad that you're here, and welcome the community together in order to acknowledge and commemorate a night of terrible in history of the Jewish people. And one of the reasons that I'm here is because it is an experience that my father and my grandfather and my mother's father also all experienced. And so I've brought things to share with you on that day, and we have a video that we can watch right after we're done, 5 minutes, that will tell you more about it. But on the day of the 9th of November in 1938, a young Jewish man killed a Nazi. And he was from Poland, and terrible things were happening to his family in Poland. And he killed him, and the Nazis used that opportunity to decide that the entire Jewish people were responsible for, it was their excuse. They were headed in that direction anyway. We all know that. But they used it as an excuse to create 2 days of complete destruction in the Jewish community. And you'll hear the students read some actual reflections by people who were kids when this happened. We're going to also do Mariv during the course of this gathering. It will be interspersed with these readings and with music, but we thought that it was, besides the fact that we don't like to trample over our Mariv service because people are there for many reasons, including saying Kaddish, we thought that on a night when we're commemorating the destruction of hundreds upon hundreds of synagogues in Germany and other areas that had already been taken over by the Nazis, that doing the brief Mariv service and being there as part of the community for people in our community are saying Kaddish and are so grateful to have a synagogue, that it blended. So we're happy to be here because we're alive and thriving. And it's important for us to acknowledge this night. Rabbi, would you like to say anything?
First of all, just want to say a good evening to everybody and welcome. And I find it actually poetic and beautiful that we are marking this commemoration on this evening, because I want you to take note that throughout the past 4 or 5 days, we've had hundreds of people on this campus. And why have they been here? To vote. And that is a decision that Adat Ariel makes. There was this very interesting man who came in, and I was opening up the JLC services this afternoon, and he waved me over, and I had never met him before, and he said, "I just want to thank you for opening up your synagogue to our community so we have a place to vote." And I said, "It's our pleasure, and I believe that it's our duty." And one of the reasons that I believe it's our duty for us to open up our synagogue, specifically for civic involvement, is to assure that things like this never happen again. So many of you are going to ask, what can we do with this? How, when we look at a time when over 250 synagogues were destroyed, over thousands of Jewish businesses were destroyed, and 30,000 Jews went to concentration camps that night, what can we do? And one of the things that we can do is to become involved, to make sure that our voices aren't lost, to maintain civic involvement, to care about the world in which we live. So in mind that today we are marking something very important, I hope that what we do here leads to action out there. Thank you all for coming this evening.
So, Cantor Aronoff will begin with a song, "It Will Never Happen Again." And Rabbi Schuldenfries explained that very well. I want to start by also saying that tonight we'll be experiencing the life of a teenager on the 9th of November, 1938. And the person whose life we'll be experiencing was my father. So it's very meaningful and emotional for me to be here with you and to be able to share this evening with you.
I believe you have song sheets.
We do.
And so in case you don't catch any of the words as I'm singing them, and if you're online, I hope you can catch what I'm singing. Seen. My ears have never heard the cries ringing out from where you that's reaching out to you. Tell me the stories, and I'll pass them down to my own, and my children will tell their children, and so on and so on, and then it will never happen again. There is no way for time to heal the wounds that did you harm. Torn from your family, pulled from your home, a brand upon your arm, a number to be your identity, but no one could steal your dignity. And somewhere there is a place in me that's reaching out to you. Tell me the stories, and I'll pass them down to my own, and my children will tell their children, and so on and so on, and then it will never happen again. And though today you're here and free, you carry the burden of memories, and I must learn your history. So no one ignores, no one denies, no one forgets the truth. Tell me the stories, and I'll pass them down to my own, and my children will tell their children, and so on and so on, and then it will never happen again. Tell me the stories, and I'll pass them down to my own, and my children will tell their children, and so on and so on, and then it will never happen again. It will never happen again.
RJ Hermes.
Nothing.
Come in the center if it would be.
Oh, okay.
Switch places. Come stand over.
On November 9th, countries around the world mark November 1939 pogrom as this tragedy, also known as Kristallnacht, which means Crystal Night or the Night of Broken Glass. The Kristallnacht pogrom marked a turning point in the treatment of Jews in Germany. In just 2 days, hundreds of synagogues were burned, thousands of Jews were arrested, and around 100 Jews were killed. Any illusion that the Jews could be tolerated in Germany were finally laid to rest. Susan Newlander Faulkner, a Jewish girl. Oh wait, should I keep going?
No, not yet. Hang on.
Oh, sorry,
That'll come
my
later.
bad.
That's okay.
Not too bad. You were good. Page 137 in your Siddur.
This is really funny. If you can rise, please do so. וירחם יכפר עוון ולא ישחית, וירבה להשיב אפו ולא יאיר כל חמתו. אדוני הוא שם מלך יעננו ויום קורנו. ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro El chai v'kayam tamidim lo chaleinu leolam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai Hama'ariv aravim.
Your backup.
Where's RJ? Yeah, here's your paper.
Here, I've got copies for all the kids.
Okay, here you go. You can hold this not quite so
The one
close
at
to
the
you.
bottom.
Sorry. Susan Newlander Faulkner, a Jewish girl who lived in Germany, was 12 years old when Hitler came to power. She expresses her feelings in this quote. From the time Hitler came to power, I would say that there was not a day that I did not walk to school or back from school without a sense of fear in the pit of my stomach. Werner Gadanik, a Jewish boy from Germany, said, I figured it this way. Hitler loves only Germans, but no other people, particularly not as Jews.
Ahavat olam beit Yisrael, second paragraph on 137. V'avatcha tesir mimenu li'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadavarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha ve'shinantam levanecha ve'dibarta bam ve'shivtecha beveitecha uvlechtecha vaderech uvshochbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha ve'hayu letotafot peinenecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. Continue with the second paragraph on the bottom of 138 and the top paragraph of 139. V'hayim shamu atishmu mitzvotai asher anachim etzavetchem yom. V'natati metoratechem midor. ושמתם את דברי אל לבבכם ועל נפשכם ועל יושבים ואתם אדם את בניכם ובנשים תפילך ולכת בדרך שלכם. אז ויאמר אדוני משה לאמור דבר פני אספור את עליהם ויעשו ציצית על כנפי למען תזכו עשיתם כל מצוותיי Adonai Elohechem emet.
I'm Stella Pankowski. Our family felt the full impact of Hitler's anti-Jewish laws, so life was filled with anxiety. Jews are banned from trams and are forbidden to drive. Jews are only allowed to do their shopping between 3 and 5 o'clock, and then and only in shops that bear the sign Jewish shop. Jews must be indoors by 8 o'clock and cannot even sit in their own gardens after that hour. Jews may not take part in any public sports. Swimming, baths, tennis courts, hockey fields, and other sport grounds are prohibited to them.
Continue in the middle of 139. Emet ve'emunah kol tov v'kayem aleinu ki Adonai Eloheinu ve'en zulato. Hosel anu nisim v'legam v'varon. The third box from the bottom of the page. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם, משה ובני ישראל הכנו שירה בשמחה רבה, ואמרו כולם, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נוראתי לא תוסף אלה, מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע ים לפני משה, זה אלי אנו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר כיפת אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
We're going to read Hashkivenu together on page 140 in English, because I think it's important for us to take a look at this prayer that asks God to help us to be going to sleep in peace and awakening in safety, and that we hope that for our people and for all people. Help us, Adonai, to lie down in peace and awaken us again, our sovereign, to life. Spread over us your shelter of peace. Guide us with your good counsel. Save us because of your mercy. Shield us from enemies and pestilence, from starvation, sword, and sorrow. Remove the evil forces that surround us. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, O God, who watches over us and delivers us, our gracious and merciful ruler. Guard our coming and our going. Grant us life and peace now and always. Praised are you, Adonai, eternal guardian of your people Israel.
Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, v'avdinu malkeinu l'chaim, frost lanu tzedakah shemacha, v'tatnenu b'tzovat ובצל כנפיך תסתירנו, כי על שומרנו מצילנו אדם. ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום, מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה, אדוני, שומר עמו ישראל לעד. ברוך אדוני לעולם אמן ואמן. ברוך אדוני מציון שכן שלהם, הללויה. ברוך אדוני אלוהים אלוהי ישראל, עשה נפלא לבדו, ברוך שם לבדו לעולמים ולעולמים ואמן. ברוך ה' היום, ברוך ה' בלילה, ברוך ה' בשוכבנו, ברוך ה' בגבנו, בידך כברכי. יראו עינינו וישמח ליבנו ותגל נפשנו בישועתך באמת, באמור לציון מלך אלוהיך, אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, כי המלכות שלך היא, ולעולמי תמלוך בכבוד, כי אין לנו מלך אלא אתה, ברוך אתה, אדוני, המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד, ועל כל מעשיו.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Ella. Okay. Hanel Zerndorfer said, once when school had a half holiday, Inga and I arranged that we would both bring our new ice skates with us and go to the outdoor ice rink after morning school. But when we got to the entrance of the rink, we were confronted by a large notice, dogs and Jews not allowed.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברך ירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון ובימיכון ובחיי תכל בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו, אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפור ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו, לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמא ויאמרו amen.
The silent Amidah begins on page 142b. Imagine that you are at an evening minyan, that you are 15, and that you came along with your grandfather who was saying Kaddish. And you sat in your shul and were there for the brief service. And the next day, your synagogue was gone.
Oseh shalom bimromav, Uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru amen. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yitgadal v'yikara shemei rabbah, v'yalmad yivra kirutei v'yilnech malchutei b'chayachonu v'yimechonu v'chay d'chol beit Yisrael, b'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam u'le'omei olmayo, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitram v'yinaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalel shmei d'kudusha brichu, li'ela min kol brachata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata adam yiron v'yamav v'imru amen. Titkabel tzloton u'valton d'chol Yisrael, kodam avu adi v'yishmai v'imru amen. Yehi shlom rabba min shamayim v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav u'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Call on Stella once again.
Gisela Gullenbeck was 5 years old and went to school the morning of November 10th, 1938. She remembers that there was a big commotion in her classroom, and her principal told the Jewish students to go home. All along the way, it appeared to me the city was on fire. Then we passed the big synagogue, and it was burning. I couldn't believe my eyes. The city wasn't burning, just Jewish businesses, synagogues, department stores. And people came and ransacked everything, and there was vile language which was splattered all over the buildings. Windows of stores had been knocked down, and whatever merchandise had been on the shelves was on the street, and people were taking it away. I was in absolute terror. I didn't know what to do. Ursula Rosenfeld, a Jewish girl, was 13 years old. She remembers that she was in her classroom when she heard strange noises and saw flames shooting up in the sky. All the children dashed outside, and she saw that her neighbor's possessions had been thrown out onto the street. It was terrifying. They had thrown all their belongings out into the street, broken things. A little children's pram was bashed to pieces, a doll, and then suddenly, 2 people in uniform came out with the Torah. They were dancing in the street. It sort of had little bells on it, and they thought it was very funny. They were shaking these bells, and then people were laughing, and then people were laughing and shouting, and then they saw me, and then they said, "There's another Jew. Let's throw her into the flames too." And it was a moment in my life I shall never forget.
Please rise if you're able for Aleinu on page 150. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoyei aratzot, velo samanu kemishbechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, וגורלנו ככל עמונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בכובעי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבותה אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת, אין עוד ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
echad. The yardsticks that we are observing this evening are for Joel Altman, Louis Eggers, Lily Faig, Rhonda Levine, Ida Lipsky, Jean Rothman, Saul Smolensky, Joseph Schnitzer, Kenneth Tuch, and Hyman Weisinger. We think of all of their lives and how their family must miss them and want to commemorate them this evening. We also think about the millions of people that we commemorate this evening who had no one to say Kaddish for them. And so we as community tonight, for one time, and I'll tell you the reason why, because I always think it's a good thing for people not to have to say Kaddish. So when people say Kaddish and they don't need to, they don't necessarily yet realize that one day they're going to need to. But how fortunate to not have to. But tonight, for just one night, we'll all say Kaddish together. For the people who died in Kristallnacht and for what came after that affected the entire Jewish people and still does. Kaddish is on page 151. Please rise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, B'alma divrach hirutei v'amich malchutei, B'chayachon u'v'yamechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, B'agala u'v'zman kari v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'la'ol me'almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, damiran b'alma v'yimru Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min Shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. You can be seated. The song that we're going to sing now is Gesher Tsar Ma'od. It's basically one that says, life can be a very, very difficult bridge. And thank God we are sitting here and in freedom. And I asked Cantor Aronoff to do this particular song with us tonight because my dad, who I'm going to talk about in just a minute, his experience, and all the people like him certainly experienced a Gesher Tsar Ma'od.
If you know it, sing along. If you don't know it, you got words in front of you, try to sing along if you can. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar me'od, gesher tsar me'od, gesher tsar me'od. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar me'od, gesher tsar me'od. Ve'ayikar
students will be reading a closing prayer after I share with you, and we'll be singing a couple of more songs. I'm going to get my notes from my husband. The song Gesher Tzarma.
And do you want to hold this, or should I stick it in the?
I'll hold it.
Okay.
The song Gesher Tzarma Od has another verse. Ve'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. And the main thing is never to be afraid. And so the story that I want to share with you today is one that was definitely a difficult bridge. But let me tell the end of the story first, which is my parents and Ken's, we both have Holocaust survivors as parents. They built lives. They enjoyed living. They reclaimed their life and their community and themselves. They survived, and they were very, very, very fortunate. But that last verse is for all of us. Don't be afraid. Act. Stand up. And Rabbi Schuldenpreis said it so well at the beginning. But now I'll tell you the story. My father, his name was, at that time, Theo Rolf Alexander, about as German as you can possibly get. He grew up in Berlin. He went to Jewish schools for his whole experience there, and in the end, he became a rabbi. So I take after my father and a line of 6 generations of rabbis in my family. So the whole family lived close by. All the cousins, the aunts and uncles, the grandparents, they had a great life. My father loved shopping. And one of the things he would do every week gladly would be to go with his mom to the department store, where in almost every department store in Berlin, they had a kosher section. So he loved the shopping, he liked tasting the food, he liked being there. And his father, my grandfather Hugo, also a very German name, fought in the German army during World War I. He actually was a prisoner of war camp commandant, believe it or not. And he met my grandmother, Kata, because she was an early feminist who decided that she was going to go and serve the army, the German army. It's ironic, isn't it? The other thing, and they married after they met each other, and here's the kicker of that. She was the secretary of an officer. And the officer came to her one day, because she wasn't all that Jewishly observant, and said, "Your holiday starts tomorrow night, and you need to go and observe it." That officer became an SS, one of the worst, absolutely worst kinds of German soldiers that they could be. They were murdering individuals every day of their military life. And he's the one who sent her to the Pesach Seder that enabled her to meet my grandfather. That tells you how absolutely ridiculous, so unthinkable that society was. And many are. The other thing I want you to know before I tell you the actual story of Kristallnacht is that my grandfather was an absolutely proud German. He was such a proud German, he didn't think there needed to be a Jewish state. There were a number of people like that living in those countries, and particularly in Germany, where people thought that they were equal and everything was great. They didn't need a Jewish state. He considered himself an anti-Zionist. Let me tell you how much my grandfather learned his lesson. So here we go. My father was at school, and when he was at school, he took the bus home, or the city bus home, And on the bus, he was with one of his fellow students, and there was a woman sitting across the aisle, and they were riding, much as you just read earlier, and they see flames in the sky. And he looks, and he sees that the dome of a synagogue, his synagogue, was afire. And he heard the woman across the aisle in the bus say, "Now they're burning the house of God. In the end, they're going to pay." And she was talking about the Nazis. So she was absolutely not a supporter of the Nazis. But my father remembered and told me what she was saying, because when he got off the bus, his life changed forever. So what happened was, he came to his house. Nobody was in it. His father wasn't there. His mother wasn't there. His sister wasn't there. Nobody was in the house. So he went into the house, and he heard very shortly after a knock on the door. When he went to answer the door, this is all true. I remember it so vividly from him telling me these things. But wait, because one of the things you're going to learn is that there are horrible, disgusting, terrible people, and then there are people who are not horrible, disgusting, and terrible. So he answered the door, and there were 2 soldiers at the door. And they came to him and they said, "Is Mr. Teets in this house?" And that was a really close friend of their family. And my father said, "No, there's no Mr. Teets in this house. He's not here. Where is he? I don't know where he is," my father said. And generally, when Nazis came to the door and they were looking for one person and they didn't get that person, they were supposed to take whoever was there. My father was 19 years old. His birthday is on November 6th. When is Kristallnacht? Not the 8th. We are doing it a day earlier. The 9th and the 10th. So can you imagine having your birthday on the 6th of November and running for your life on the 9th? That's what happened. So one of the soldiers was getting ready to take him, and the other soldier said to my father, "We're coming in, do you have any other doors in your house that lead out to the street?" And my father said, "Yes." And the second soldier looked at him and said, "Do you understand me? Do you have any other doors in your house that lead out to the street?" What was he telling him to do? He was telling him to run. So he did. So apparently, one of the soldiers was drafted to do these things and didn't necessarily agree with what was happening. So my father ran. And when he ran to somebody else's house, eventually he came upon his synagogue spot. And when he got there, obviously, it was all in flames, but he saw his father. And his father and a number of the other men in the community had gathered together to try and to run into their synagogue, even though it was aflame, to save whatever they could save. Everybody in German synagogues had a little box in front of their family's seats in the shul. My father was able to get into the box and pull out his bar mitzvah talit. This is it. And as you can see, or you will see when you get up and take a look at it, it had already caught fire. But he was able to save it. The rest of the men, meanwhile, ran up to the Aron HaKodesh, to the Ark, to get the Torahs out. And their rabbi met them and said, "Each of you take this Torah," whatever Torah he was handing them. "Guard them. Wherever you go, whatever happens to you, take the Torah with you. And so my father, here it is, this particular Torah. My father took the Torah, and let me just tell you the journey, if that's okay. This Torah I just found out, and my father never knew. A few years ago, I found out that this Torah is more than 350 years old. This Torah is a mystical Torah, which doesn't mean it doesn't have all the parshiot in it. It does. But it was a combination between a Sephardic and Ashkenazic Torah scroll in terms of the scribing. When you go to look at it, it has a curly Q pei in there, the letter pei, throughout. And I can't see it, but it has hidden letters in the seams. Torahs like that were not scribed in Germany. They were scribed in places like Sfat in Israel. And in some cases, they were scribed in Prague. So let me just tell you the journey of this Torah, and maybe you can think about how it did this. How did a Torah that conceivably could have been scribed in Sfat, when there were no nonstop planes going between Israel and Germany, let alone the United States, how did that Torah get into an ark that ended up burning in Berlin? And what kind of wonderful story is it that that Torah went from Berlin on a ship all the way to Shanghai, China, which is where my family fled, the only open port in the entire world that Jews could go to without a passport, all the way to China, to San Francisco, California, to Adad Ariel. What an incredible heritage that Torah has. The person who was the scribe, the sofer, who saw this when I was having it looked at, came to me and said, you know when you have that experience in your life that you never expect you're going to ever have, and you've wanted to have it your whole professional life and it just hasn't happened? Well, that day is today for me. Because apparently, there's only approximately 4 of these Torahs left in the entire world. And it got saved from a burning synagogue on November 9th, 1938, when the rabbi, who didn't survive, was handing Torahs to everybody else. I want to let you know about another good person. The fire marshals in Berlin put out fires in buildings next to synagogues and next to Jewish stores, but did not touch to help any of the Jewish places in the city. But the fire marshal, who was in my father's district and my grandfather's, grandmother's, and my aunt's district, knew all the people in the district and knew the people from the synagogue. So he came to them and he said, I can't put out the fires, but board up your stores. Board them up now before people come to them, and get your things out of the synagogue as much as you can. Because he felt helpless, but he wasn't evil. One more story about that. My father watched an SS person drive down the street in the car that day before he started running, before he knew what was going on. And he looked at the guy, and the guy was his upstairs neighbor. When he had been just a regular officer before it was a Nazi government, the guy always insisted on taking my father and my aunt, when they were little, on rides in the Jeep. And that day, he looked at him and saw the new insignia on his uniform, and knew what had transpired there. So, my dad and my grandfather ran for 2 days straight. From train to bus to streetcar to walking to running through fields, eventually going out of the city completely to the home of one of their female relatives who was unmarried and elderly, where they thought that they might be safe. It was constant and constant running for those 2 days, and then it temporarily stopped. Right after that, my grandmother, who was an amazing woman, when I was a kid, I'll just say this, when I was a kid and they were living in Oakland, because thank God, I got to know all my grandparents, I would walk into her house and she would be like rocking out to 60s rock and roll. She died when she was 72, but she was involved in everything celebratory and everything life-affirming. And she sat her family down and said, "We are getting out of here. Tell me, do I have your permission to go find somewhere for us to go, anywhere, and for us to get ready and to go there?" And the family all agreed. And she went out, and we have no idea how she was able to do this because it really wasn't available at that time, but she got passage for them on a ship to China. One other interesting thing. I hope it's okay. Is it okay with this? One other thing. They lived in Berlin, which was a more liberal city than most of the others that Jews were trapped in. They were able to take things with them, whereas my grandparents on my mother's side could take one little suitcase and that was it. But they got to take things, but they didn't get to take anything of value. So the day that they were packing them to go, which was, I have the document here, they got their documents to leave the country almost exactly a month after Kristallnacht, and they were gone. But this guy was supervising the packing so that Jews would, God forbid, not take anything of value with them because he had to leave it, and somebody moved into your apartment and got it. But the guy said, "I'm going for lunch." Really lazy guy, apparently. He said, "I'm going for lunch," and said to my father, "You watch them pack things." So after the guy went to lunch, my father said to his mother, "Hurry, put stuff in, like the cushions or whatever it's going to be." But they couldn't do it with everything. So when they finally got on the train to leave Berlin, my father decided that he was going to act like somebody who had an extreme mental illness. And so when the Gestapo went through the train, checking tickets and finding out whether people had anything of value, he basically just said that what he did was talk nonsense until the person just left him alone. And he walked away with his coat filled with, I have their Chanukiah, not valuables, but human valuables, right? I have the Chanukiah for my family. There's one more thing so they took passage to China. How much time have I used? Okay. They took passage to China. It took them a very long time to get there. In Vienna, Austria, I'll tell you just for a moment what was happening there. My grandfather on my mother's side, Karl, had also fought in the wrong side in World War I. He was a veteran of the Austrian army. Their apartment had secret rooms. I don't know why, but apparently a number of them did. It has secret rooms. But he said, "I fought for this country. I am a strong person. I am not hiding." and he hid a bunch of other people in their apartment, but refused to hide. So on Kristallnacht, my grandfather was taken to Dachau. Luckily, all the way around, he was an attorney who had a lot of clients outside of Austria. My grandmother wrote to every single one of them, and they wrote the government until it was early enough in the arrests that they let him go. And 2 weeks later, they left Vienna with little suitcases and nothing of value. And guess where they went? Shanghai, China. And for me, at least, the rest is history, because that's where my parents met. I have one more thing that I want to tell you. There were no places, you heard, that everything was shut down to Jewish kids. Everything, Jews. But Jewish kids couldn't go anywhere. There was one place in Berlin, that Jewish kids could go to, teens. They could go to the zoo. Well, the zoo was in something called the Tiergarten. They had a beer garden there and a dance place and all of that. And the person who ran the zoo in Berlin refused to close it to Jews. Why? In World War I, when the head of the zoo was the head of the zoo as well, and there were war, only one community came forward to try and help them take care of the animals. Only one community raised money in every single one of their places of worship to try and assist so that those animals wouldn't die. I think you know who they were. So when the time came to support the Jewish community, he did. And you know what? He stood up. Do you think he got killed? No, he didn't. Which lets you know something very important. That sometimes the things happen to people because people don't stand up. Because he lived through it all, and he said no. So that's the story of my family. I want to ask you just for a minute, how do you think this Torah got from where it went to Berlin, Germany? How did it do that? Have you ever read, I know that kids have these stories. Have you ever read one of those stories where you have to pick what your choice is at the end of the page, and then, you got to flip to the page where your choice is made? I think about this Torah that way because I have no idea how that particular Torah got into that synagogue, got to my father's hands, we know how that happened, and then made it across the world for you to experience here. So that's it. If anybody has questions later on, I would love to answer them. And you can take a look. Please don't touch the Torah or the Talit. They're very fragile. But I want to share one beautiful thing with you about the Talit. My daughter Shira, who was born when I was at Adat Ariel, she and her husband, when they were getting married, by the way, they met at Camp Ramah. Everybody go to Camp Ramah. When they were getting ready to get married, my daughter came to me and said, we'd like to use Grandpa's Talit as our chuppah. So can you imagine how beautiful it was? My father was alive then. To watch a symbol of something that was terrible turn into something beautiful. And all of you can remember that way. So now what we're going to do is we are going to hear a poem that was written. Who's reading it? introduce yourself.
I'm Ryan Bornstein. The poem is, I am a Jew from Frontabas. I am a Jew and will be a Jew forever. Even if I die from hunger, never will I submit. I will always fight for my people on my honor. I will never be ashamed of them. I give my word. I'm proud of my people, how dignified they are. Even though I am oppressed, I will always come back to life.
Thank you. Cantor Aronoff? I really do want to do on Yisrael first. What? I really do want to do on Yisrael there's not time.
We're going to close, although I know that Rabbi Alexander is open to questions, and also y'all have to take a look at this stuff. Don't touch but look, because it's amazing. I mean, I've known about this Torah for a long time, but I never saw it open. And for those of you who have seen a Torah, you will see that there are differences in this Torah, between this Torah and many other Torahs that you've seen. So, what did you just say to me?
And plus, we're going to screen a video, a 5-minute video about Kristallnacht as well.
Rabbi Alexander, can you also just remember when we were walking, you said about the grandfather?
I did. I said that at the beginning.
What?
And later on in his life.
Oh, okay. So, yeah,
Sure.
I said to you about my grandfather and thinking that Germany was the be-all and end-all and we didn't need a Jewish state. Well, obviously, he changed. And it's important for us to remember that there were people who lived who didn't have a Jewish state to come and help them, to airlift in and to help them get out or to fight for them. And in our generation, we take a lot of that for granted. But my grandfather didn't take it for granted for a single day after his experiences in his life.
Eli, Eli is on the bottom of your song sheet, I think. Probably most of you know this, but in case you don't, the words to this song were written by a woman named Chana Senesh, somebody who was able to get out of Hungary, maybe, I think it was, and Hungary, and make it to Palestine, which was Israel before 1948, but then went back to help people leave Europe and go to Palestine, and she was captured and she perished. But she wrote this poem. Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam, achov ve'ayam, rishru shel hamayim, ve'rak hashamayim, tfilat adam, achov ve'ayam, rishru shel hamayim, ve'rak hashamayim.
we're going to conclude with Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai.
Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu Chai. Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu Chai. Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu Chai. Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael 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 Chai.
Ve'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. Stand up, speak, and be a part of a society that we help to create where we will end anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish pogroms, like this one that's not on there anymore. And be strong. We have so much to be joyful for. So say thank you to the kids in Kita Zion. And to all of you who are here tonight. I'm going to put on a 5-minute video about Kristallnacht. If you want to watch it, fine. If not, I have some pictures here and things that I can explain to people if you want to come up and see them. So if anybody wants to ask any questions. Let's watch the video. Can you see it? If we get out of here. I don't know how to do that.
Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, was the wave of violent anti-Jewish pogroms on November 9th and 10th of 1938. It took place throughout Germany, annexed Austria, and in areas of Czechoslovakia recently occupied by German troops. Kristallnacht owes its name to the shards of shattered glass from the windows of synagogues, homes, and Jewish-owned businesses that lined German streets in the wake of the pogrom. On November 7, 1938, Ernst von Rath, a German embassy official stationed in Paris, was assassinated by Herschel Grimsband, a 17-year-old Polish Jew living illegally in Paris. Grimsband revengefully shot the diplomat after witnessing the expulsion of not only his parents, but thousands of Jews of Polish citizenship living in the German Reich. Von Rath died on November 9, 1938. The same day, at a meeting of Nazi Party leadership, propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, the chief instigator of the Kristallnacht pogroms, suggested that world Jewry had conspired to commit the assassination and ordered that any demonstration, while not organized by the Nazi Party, shall not be hampered. Newspapers reported otherwise. After Goebbels' speech, violence erupted in various parts of the Reich. Paramilitary, or SA, and Hitler Youth units throughout Germany and its annexed territories destroyed Jewish-owned homes and businesses. Jewish artifacts were confiscated, and many young, healthy Jewish men were arrested and filled local jails. The rioters destroyed 267 synagogues throughout Germany, Austria, and the Sudetenland. Many synagogues burned throughout the night in full view of public and of local firefighters who had received orders to intervene only to prevent flames from spreading to nearby buildings.